Hey everybody. In this video, I want to talk about Coming to an Awareness of Language by Malcolm X, the essay I had given you to read for homework. There was also a journal homework assignment about this essay, so if you haven't handed that in yet, you can still do so. But yeah, I just want to kind of go through this and connect this to what is going to be our first essay. So directly after this video, I'm going to record a video that is going to explain our first big assignment, the narrative essay. So I'll save most of the instructions for that video, but what I can say is that coming to an awareness of language, this is a narrative essay. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be reading, Talking Back, that one kind of a narrative essay. Some of the other ones that we're going to read are more so narrative essays. This one definitely is. So I want to start this video by talking about what makes this a narrative essay. And I think those are the questions I had for you for homework as well. I asked you like what characteristics of this make it a narrative essay. So I just want to hit on a few of those and talk about things that we can keep in mind when we start working on our own narrative essay, which again I'll explain very shortly in another video. Okay, so the first thing, it's a personal story. It's told from a first-person point of view. It's Malcolm X is the author. It's from his point of view. So that's something that we're going to be looking for in our narrative essays. Is that's going to be from your point of view. I know something that you might have been told before is that you can't use the letter I, that you can't say I in essays like this. Well, for this kind of essay, you can. And I think in general, kind of for any sort of essay, you can. Um, it's not always relevant, but I've definitely read essays and books, by scholars and academics where they use the word I. It's something professional writers do. So I don't really know where people came up with that, but you can use the word I. And for this kind of essay, we're going to have to, because it's going to be from your point of view. So obviously he's telling a story, telling a personal story. That's the first thing. The second thing, details and descriptions. So, for instance, I want to read here some details that he gives us. This is like, I don't know, the third sentence of the essay. So he's in jail, right? And he says, I guess that's why, unable to do anything else, I soon began writing to people I had known in the hustling world, such as Sammy the pimp, John Hughes the gambling house owner, the thief Jump Steady, and several dope peddlers. So what I would ask you guys there is, what does it do for him to give us those specific names? So what I just read when he's telling us like who he wrote the letters for, and he tells us, Sammy the pimp and these people, how would it have been different if he was just like, so I wrote letters to some people I knew, and he just cut it off there. And I think the way that it'd be different is that giving us the names, it adds something. It makes it more realistic. It makes it feel more like it makes it easier to like throw yourself into the story. So I think the lesson we can take from this is to be specific, be as specific as you can. When we're describing things, you want to be as specific as you can. Giving people's names, or you know, if it's like if you got a coffee, it's like if you're telling your story, like yeah, and then I stopped and got coffee. It's like, well, where did you go? Was it Dunkin' Donuts? Was it Wawa? Like where is it? Not that we need to do a commercial for them, but just having details like that, it makes it feel more full, more realistic, all of those things. So yeah, just an example of some details there. Setting is another one. You want to describe the setting of wherever like an important scene is taking place. So you want to think about what it looks like, sounds like, smells like, all of those things. Um, Something that he doesn't do so much in this essay, but I think I'm going to want in our essay, and he could have had more of, was giving dialogue. So, for instance, there's this one part when he's talking about like the way someone else who was in prison, the way that they spoke, and he's like envious of the way that they talk, and it made him like want to know more about language and get better with language, right? So he says, this is on the second page at the bottom. It had really begun back in Charlestown prison when Bimby first made me feel envy of his stock of knowledge. Bimby had always taken charge of any conversation he was in, and I had tried to emulate him. So, what I think with this is anytime you find yourself explaining what somebody said, like the way he says here, Bimby had always taken charge of any conversation, I think it's always better to just kind of give direct dialogue. So, if you're telling a story, or, if you're writing your story for this narrative essay, and you're saying, oh, and then like my mom yelled at me, it's always better to just give the direct dialogue. It just makes it more interesting, more engaging, and again, more realistic, more able to like throw ourselves into the story, right? So I think maybe there could have been some dialogue here, and for our essays, I'm definitely going to want dialogue. There's some kind of crazy stuff in this. Like, so there's one part where he talks about copying the entire dictionary, and every time I read this essay now, I always wonder, like, yeah, did he really do the whole dictionary? I mean, maybe he did. I don't know. Am I being too skeptical? Did he do the whole dictionary? But he talks about, he went through A and he copies all the words, the definitions and stuff. And he goes through the whole thing. And something else I want to focus here is like how he feels once he starts doing this. Because yeah, at the beginning, he says like his handwriting is very bad, and like that's part of why he's doing that is he wants his handwriting to get better. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of the words that he uses to describe his like emotions and feelings when he's going through this process of like getting better with language and everything. He says, this is on the last page, I woke up the next morning thinking about those words, immensely proud to realize that not only had I written so much, but I'd written words I never knew. He goes on, I was so fascinated that I went on. I copied the dictionary's next page. Um, and then, of course, we have the last sentence, which I want to talk about more, when he says, in fact, to then, I never had been so truly free in all my life. So those words, free, fascinated, proud, I just think that's so different. It makes me think of how Vershawn Young describes the way that we're taught English in school and everything, and he used that term linguistic self hatred. And I just think that's the total opposite of what Malcolm X is saying here of feeling proud, fascinated, free. And I don't know. I wonder what about his experience made him have those kind of positive emotions around reading and writing and language, because I feel like for so many of us it's just a lot of really negative emotions. We're just used to being corrected or being told that like what we're doing isn't good enough, or we're not following the rules, we're not paying attention. Getting the X's and red ink all over the paper or whatever. So many bad feelings around reading and writing. Taking reading quizzes where like the teacher's basically accusing you of not having done the reading. That's what those quizzes always felt like to me. I think his experience here, not having, he's not learning this stuff in school, right? He's teaching it to himself, and maybe it took him longer to do it, and maybe his methods weren't the most like direct and everything with copying the dictionary and stuff. Um, but he ends up getting much more positive experiences of it. And I feel like that's because he's not sitting there like filling out grammar worksheets. He's like trying to figure out how language works, language that he can use to try to like make arguments and convince people of his beliefs or whatever. And he's reading stuff to try to like open his mind and learn new things. Um, so yeah, I just thought that was interesting, the feelings that he has with it. Okay, so and then back to that last sentence, he says, "In fact, up to then, I never had been so truly free in my life." So obviously, he's still in prison when he's saying this, but he's saying this feeling of freedom comes from, I guess, like being able to express himself, being able to like have his message connect with other people. He says one thing earlier that like he thinks it's bad to write in dialect. I kind of disagree with this personally, but he says he's talking about like he wants to write letters to like the president or the governor of Massachusetts and stuff like that. He says on the second page, he says, "How would I sound writing in slang the way I would say it? Something such as, 'Look, Daddy, let me pull your coat about a cat,' Elijah Muhammad." So I get what he's saying there, that other people are going to judge the language, right? I talked about this in the other video, the kind of practical thing of like if you're going to a job interview, you're going to use standard English, or if you're writing a letter to the president, you're going to use standard English versus like how it should be, where I think dialect should be more accepted. And I like the dialect. I think dialect is just generally more interesting, like the kind of 50s dialect. I guess he references in this essay. Um, so I kind of prefer the dialect, but yeah. So he's talking about like feeling that sense of freedom from being able to express himself, from being able to have his message connect with people and things like that. And obviously we know Malcolm X, becomes a great speaker, and that's he becomes really effective at like giving political speeches and stuff like that. That's like what he was famous for. And it's interesting though in his speeches, I've read a few of them. He usually talks in a way that's much more like he usually does kind of talk in dialect. Like he makes a point at the beginning of one of his speeches about like how he wants to use the language of the people, and he's there like for the masses of people, and he doesn't care about the fancy rich people. He wants to connect with people where they're at. And I think that kind of makes sense. So I don't know if I agree with him about not wanting to write in dialect here, but so this being a narrative essay, we talked about all the things, the storytelling elements, right? The details, the dialogue, being specific with it. The other thing that I want to hit on, so the thing that makes it a narrative essay and not just like an autobiography or not just like a story or something or not just a narrative is that a narrative essay always has a message or like a thesis. It has a clear takeaway. So I would ask you, what is the message of his essay here? What is the takeaway? And I think it's this kind of thing about language being important, about what language did for him, coming to an awareness of language, like he calls it. But the way that the like liberating or like freeing sort of feeling he was able to get from that, even though he was in jail when it was happening. So not to anticipate the next video too much, but that's going to kind of be the assignment I'm going to give you guys. It's going to be to write a narrative essay that tells a story about why language is important. So, when we talked about the Virchon Young essay in the other video, I think that essay showed us language being important basically because it can be used to treat people unfairly. We talked about how speakers of dialect, if you speak a dialect, it's viewed as unprofessional, or if people speak in a dialect, other people think that they're dumb or uneducated. Um, so I think that essay showed us like, yeah, a kind of negative thing, I guess, about like language being important because people get treated unfairly because of the way that they write or the way that they speak, you know. And I guess this one would say language is important because I don't know, freedom, expression, something like that. I don't know, but I'm gonna give you more specific topics for this. But yeah, telling a story that shows that language is important. I think that's kind of what we have here, and that's kind of what we're going to be working on. So we'll talk more about that coming up. I think that's all I want to say with this essay. All right, talk to you soon.